Okay, cool. All of you are able to hear. Let's start quickly with today's class. Before that, let's quickly revise what we have done. So last week we just started with our one course. We have done the basics of HTML. We have done the basics of CSS. We are still completing the CSS. It will take around probably today's class and tomorrow class as well. Then we'll go for JavaScript and then further topics in JavaScript. Anyways, moving forward, we have continued with HTML. Then last class we started with the HTML forms. What do you mean by HTML form? As you can see, form is something which is used to take an input and collect the user input and submit to the server. So HTML form is used to collect user input. The user input is most often sent to a server for processing, right? Because ultimately, when you collect something, you send it to server for processing. Form element is used to create HTML form. So HTML form is used to create HTML form for user input, something like this form, whatever form elements you have, and then cloak by form tag. Form element is a container. Container means it can put a text, it can put a checkbox, radio button, submit button, etc., etc. Then we have something called input element. What is input element? That input element can be displayed in many ways, depending upon what kind of attribute you want. You want a text input form, you want radio, you want checkbox, you want submit, you want button. Then we have label element. Label element defines a label for the elements. It helps user to understand the label required from the form. The for attribute of the label type, this is important one. So you can add a note here. The for attribute of the label type should be equal to the id attribute of the input element. So you know consistently what kind of input is required, and that should be given in the label. So let's look at example of text input. This is what I'm saying. The for attribute of label should be equal to the input type that we are having for this one. Okay. So if I have input for equal to fname, my fname should be given in the id as well. If I've given label for sname, that should be given in my id for input type. Okay. This is for text input. Same, we can go for radio input, we can go for checkbox input, we can go for submit button. All of that we have seen it in our web page. Let me show you that where we have created those forms. Let me open index.html and let me quickly show what we have done. So I'm going to share the complete screen, and parallelly you can see all that. So I'll close this. I'll close this and I'll open Sublime Text. Reduce a bit, and you can see parallelly on left and right. So these are the kind of forms that we have. First one is a text form, second is a radio form. As you can see, this is a text form, this is a radio form, checkbox form, and submit button. Obviously, these are multi-select also. So I can select multiple values. Submit button, and I click on submit. Since nothing will lead, so it will go back to the action page because there is no action attached to it. Coming back to here, what we have now, different input types we have created. In the submit button, I don't have any submit attribute. As you can see in the action page.php, what I have in the action page.php, it is just an empty page. And since this resource is not found, that's why we're receiving this error. Obviously, it's my response. Whatever action that I want to create, I can take it to another server, I can take to another web page, etc., etc. Okay. Then we start with introduction to CSS. What do you mean by introduction to CSS? Let me turn it back to this. In introduction to CSS, very first thing, what is CSS? CSS is Cascading Style Sheet. It can control layout of multiple web pages all at once, and it describes how HTML elements are to be displayed. So technically speaking, what needs to be displayed, that is determined by HTML. How it needs to be displayed, that is determined by CSS, right? Functionality part, that is determined by JavaScript. These are the core fundamentals of any web page: HTML, CSS, JavaScript. HTML for content and structure, CSS for how to display animations, and JavaScript for functionality. External style sheets are stored in .css or SCSS files. What is called cascading? Cascading means something which will be replicated to children, right? So style applied to a parent element will also apply to all children elements within the parent. That's what is called cascading. Example, when you put the body text as blue, not only the body becomes blue, the heading becomes blue, the paragraph becomes blue, other text element becomes blue. Everything will turn blue. Then next thing is why CSS. So in CSS, we have HTML 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Currently, we have the latest version HTML 5. In 3.2, something called font and color text were used. Prior to that, they were not there in the picture. What is the problem? The problem is if I just implement via HTML, I have to use something like this. For individual elements, I have to define their color, I have to define their background properties, so on and so forth, right? So without CSS, I can use it by HTML 3.2, but again, it's not a very effective procedure because everywhere I have to add this tag, and that is just an overhead for any developer. But with CSS, I can do is If I have a common property, I have to apply some common property. I can just define it inside the with CSS. Then we move for next part, which was types of CSS. What do you mean by types of CSS, or what are the different ways you can insert a cascading style sheet in HTML? Let's see. There are three different types: external CSS, internal CSS, inline CSS, and all have their own use cases. What do you mean by external CSS? It is useful when CSS is very large. For example, multiple web pages are there and CSS involves many properties. It doesn't make sense to use it as an inline or internal CSS. Then you can store in a .css file externally and you can call there. It just includes the reference to that .css file, link relation style sheet, and define wherever is your devang.css, and just define inside the devang.css, you can define the properties you want. CSS files are case sensitive and space sensitive, so do not use space between 10 and pixel because these are case sensitive. Okay, and obviously space sensitive also. No extra space between value and unit. Then we talked about internal CSS. It is useful when all elements of the same tag follow the same style. One single HTML page has unique style defined inside the style element and can inside the head section. All elements of the same tag follows the same style. For example, anywhere where I find H2, I can give text align as center, so everything will become text align in center, right? Body, I want to make background color, so it will come on background color as light blue. The use case it won't be able to help is when you make Devang as center and Sharma as left. In that case, I can provide different ID. You can give a class ID, you can give a div ID, whatever way you like. Class is used by dot and div is used by hash. I can give different IDs and then I can individually select the colors. Inline CSS, it is useful when it is customized to each element or when your CSS is very short. Apply for a unique style for single element, use style attribute for element style. For example, I don't want to give ID here, but since this is the only customization, only CSS that I need, so what I can do is I can use inline CSS. Here I can define the text line center, here I can define the text line as left, and I can give corresponding values here. So this becomes in center, this becomes in left. The next part comes, can one web page or HTML file contains more than one type of CSS? The answer is yes. It can contain all three types together. Next follow-up question comes, if there are conflicting CSS, then what should be the final output of my web page? So if you look at this, in this case, my inline CSS is telling me text align center, but my internal CSS is telling me text align center, but my inline CSS is saying text align left. My output will be Sharma will be on the left. Why? Because priority of CSS is such that first inline is executed, then internal, then external. Because inline is the most nearest to the HTML element, then internal, then external. Then we talked about CSS syntax. CSS syntax to understand, we have to talk about selector. What is a selector? Selector is the HTML element that you want to style. Declaration is one or more declarations separated by a semicolon. Each declaration has the format property and value, just like a key value pair. So example, you can see in H2, you have color red, you have text align in center. So selector, H2 is a selector, it points to HTML element you want to style. Declaration includes color and red, text align in center. Now CSS selectors are used to select the HTML element you want to style. Example, CSS element selector, for example, p tag, color is red, text align in center. It will apply to all p elements in the HTML. CSS ID selector, what is ID selector? It uses the ID specific element. For example, if I have ID equal to p1, I can use hash here. Color I can give red and text align I can give center. So ID is used by hash and dot, class is used by dot. Then we talked about CSS class selector. Whenever you have a class attribute, so using the class attribute, you can use dot name and you can provide the properties of CSS. And finally, the difference between ID and class attribute, ID is specific to one element, class can be used to multiple elements, right? Inside a class, you can use multiple things, as you can see. Then multiple classes can be used in CSS selector. This one is correct, but ID you cannot use as multiple. Then we talked about CSS universal selector. Just like in SQL command, we give star is used to select all the rows. In the universal selector, when I give a star, it is used to apply to property everywhere. Okay, all elements, all HTML elements in the page. Then we have CSS grouping selector. Grouping selector select all HTML elements within the same style properties. So inside a table head, inside a table dim, if I have to combine them together, I can combine like this. Then we talked about CSS colors. In CSS colors, we talked about background color. Background color is a color shown behind the text or the image. So in Sublime Text you are seeing, background color is black, the text color is white. Text color is said, which is the color of the text. And color of the text color is given like color red. Background color is given by background -color. Obviously, you won't make both same, otherwise it will become invisible. And that's exactly the property which is used whenever you scratch a coupon card. So suddenly the background color changes when you start scratching it, and that is when you see some kind of a reward. The best example you can find in Phone Pay or Google Pay if anyone uses it. Code we have seen for this, and we've seen the respective output. This color will not be visible. Why? Because background color and the text color is same. Cool. This is something that we have covered so far. Today we are going to start with more properties of CSS. So CSS background is what we are going to start with. But prior to that, give me clear if everybody clear with it. Okay, all clear. Let's start with this. Next topic is CSS backgrounds. What are we going to cover in the background? That is something important before going to margin and all. We're going to certain things like background color we'll talk about. Background image we'll talk about. Background repeat we'll talk about. And last thing is, one more thing we can talk about is attachment. And then position. These 5 things are going to be in our agenda today. Okay, let's go one by one. The very first thing is background color. What do you mean by background color? As the name says, you will define the color of the background, right? So let's write it as A. First property, if I have to apply to whole body / web page of same color. If I have to give the whole body or web page of the same color, in that case, what I can do? I can give body and whatever background color I want to give, I can turn it that background. Let's open our index2.html. That is what we have used for CSS. And let's apply the property there. So I come here inside my style property. I'm just going to add something. And before I add that, let me decrease the size. Let me get the web page as well. This will go here. One moment. And this should go here. This is not required. I'm putting this on the left. This should be put on the right. Okay. I think this one should be fine. Now I'm going to share the whole screen. I think now should be crystal clear visible, right? On the left side, you can see what is my current web page. Right side, I'm adding some property. What I'm going to add here is in the style element, I'm just going to add body. Inside my body, I want the background color, whatever you want. Let's say I want yellow. Okay. I refresh this. So my entire body color should become yellow. I refresh this. And surprisingly, okay, some error was there. Background color and yellow. Yep, now everything becomes yellow. There was 2 columns, that was the syntax error, but anyways, now everything becomes yellow. This is for everything in the web page. Now what I want is, I want to give second use case different colors to different sections. How I can do that? If I want different colors in different sections, how I can do that? Let's see in web page. In that case, there are 2 ways. What are the 2 ways? First of all, you guys tell me, then I'll tell the answer. If you have to give different colors to different sections in the web page, what do I mean by that? I mean like, I want this Devang 2 to be blue, and I want this Devang 4 to be any other color, let's say red. So how will this turn blue and how will this turn black? How will this turn red? Tell me this. Correct. Both ways are correct, right? Both are correct. What are the both ways? First is that I can use inline CSS. So specific HTML attribute, I can use inline CSS, part number 1, easy version. Second version, I can give the ID to it. Either I use a div ID or I use a class ID. I can use that also. Remind you again, one class ID can be used with multiple HTML elements. So don't use the same class ID. Everyone clear? There are 2 ways. Number 1, you can use the inline CSS. Each different HTML element, they will have different property. Second thing is, if you don't want to use inline CSS, you can give different attributes. So either you can keep ID or you can give class. so that they have different IDs, and based upon div ID or class ID, you can give the properties. Both of the ways we have tested. So two ways. First properties is using inline CSS. Second way is using different ID, either class or div. Just make them different, just to be clear. Okay. So let's in index.html. I'm just reducing this. Somewhere I will have Devang 2, somewhere I will have Devang 4. So, okay. This color is already red. Let's say I want to make it blue. So I have to make it blue, something like this. What about Devang 4? Devang 4 color is nothing. I want to give the color. So color, let's say I want to give it red. Okay. I have set the color as red. Refresh it. Now Devang 2 becomes blue, Devang 4 becomes red. That's what I needed, right? That's all I was saying. Coming back here, two ways are there. Just copy paste what we have listed. This is what we need. This we don't need. And here in the style property, I just need one thing. So just delete it here. Okay. That is one way. Another way can be different sections. They can be different IDs. That ID needs to be unique. Class or div. It has to be a unique ID. And then you do what? Apply the CSS property of background color to each of them. Both of them is correct. Either way you can use it. Okay. And when you define the color, for example, I define color as blue or color as red. That's not the only way. You can use RGB also, and you can use hexadecimal color also. So if I want to give RGB color, I can give. If I want to give the hexadecimal code, I can give that also. So can use RGB or hexadecimal code as well. What next? Next thing is we have transparency. Transparency you can say, or opposite also you can say, opacity in a web page. What do you mean by transparency and opacity? Let's see that also. As the name suggests, it defines the transparency of a element. Okay. Range will be what? Range of opacity will be from 0 to 0 to 1.0. Opacity and transparency are exactly opposite. So if you have 0 opacity, means 100% transparency. If you have 1 opacity, means 0% transparency. Lower value means lower opacity, means what? More transparency. Right? Let's look at with the code example. I'm directly going to implement the code here. Okay. I have to take it to here. Makes more sense. What I want to do is I want to apply some opacity property here. I have a border. I have a solid violet border. Color I have already given. Now what I want to do is I just want to give something which is opacity. Color is red. Let's do something else also. Let's include opacity. So in opacity, I can give, let's say 0.5. Okay, just refresh it. Just observe currently Devang 4 here, and now I'm going to refresh. Have you noticed something is dim? The color has not become yellow. If some people think that color has become yellow, I've given the colors red. But why it has become dim? Because I've increased the opacity to 0.5. Everybody can see? Guys, yes, no? Okay. I've done 0.5. What if I do 0.0? 0.0 means 0% opacity means it is completely removed now. And if I give 0.9, refresh, now you can see here, if I make opacity as exactly 1, again it will be totally visible. Okay, something like this. So based upon whatever opacity value you are giving, you can see the result there. Like this. Okay. So taking this here, this is one example. I don't have to save it. I've already saved it. So copying this, increasing my Sublime text, going back to this. This is the code example of opacity. So we got the opacity, we got the transparency, and what else? We got the background color as well. Now next property we talk about. Background color is done. Next property we talk about is background image. So in background color, there are 3 subsections we covered. First is applied to whole body. Second, applied to individual section. 2 ways for that. And third is transparency or opacity. Now we're going to start with second one, which is background image. What do you mean by background image? And what are the different subsections? Again, just like we have subsections in the background color, we'll have subsections in the background image. First, if I have to add a background image to complete body/web page, what will I do? Simple code. You have to apply a background image to complete body or web page. I will just give body. Inside the body, I will give a background image. The property name is background image. Okay. And you can give whatever URL you want to give here. Obviously, it can be local, it can be global, whatever way you want to keep. So you want to keep one image which is common in all the properties. In that case, you can directly go for this background image. Everybody clear with this? Okay. So do I need to show a demo? I am thinking that. If not, we can something find on Google and we can use that as an image. I think we did use an image in index.html, so we can use similar image. Let's see. Did we use an image? Yeah, we use this image. So let's take this one. Copy this. Go to index2. Okay. Refresh this. Let's go back to our page. Let's refresh. As you can see, I got my web page. Have you observed something that the same image is repeated here? If you observe something, same image is being repeated here. Okay. Anyways, so this is what I can do is I can have why the same image is repeated. By the way, the same image is repeated because it divides into the size of the image. Whatever the size of the web page divides by the size of the image. Number of instances it has, same times it is repeated. So this size of G, as you can see from Google, it is exactly half the size of the web page. So it is repeated 2 times. If it was 1/4, repeated 4 times, so on and so forth. So if I want to apply something, obviously I'm not going to keep it because it doesn't look good, but just an example, I'm putting that here in the code. I'll be removing this. In the code, I've given this example, and I will be removing it from. Anyways, coming back to this, that is how you can add a background image to complete web page or a body. Second part comes, I don't want to add a background image to complete web page. What do I want to add is, I want to add to a specific element. So second use case, adding background image to a specific HTML element. How will you do that? Well, to do that, what you have to do? Just go to that code, wherever you want to add, just define where you want to add. Let's say I want to add in table, table header, table data. This is where I want to add. So copy this, paste it. Wherever you want to add, just add the content there. Okay. Third case, I want an image to be repeated. I want a particular image to be repeated. Now in repeated, there are 2 things. So repeat background image two cases. I want it to horizontally repeat. Horizontally repeat, if I have to do, I'll come here, take the body again, paste it here. If I want the image to be horizontally repeated, I can say background repeat, and repeat where? Repeat along the x-axis. Horizontal means x-axis. So you can say repeat x. That's it. Take this, see the demo. It is saved. Now I come here. Okay, let me just click it here. Come a bit here and refresh this. Is my image repeated or what? Let's see. What's the error? My body, inside my body, I want the background image URL this. And I've not given the semicolon. That's why it was error. Anyways, now it is done. Let's refresh. Okay, as you can see, it is just repeated only once, right? Now, if I want to repeat across the y-axis, what I can do? Just replace y. Now it will be vertically repeated. Can you guys see? This is vertically repeated. And if I do repeat x, that was horizontally repeated. So, like this. Okay. So, again, this doesn't look good on my web page. So, this is just used for demo purpose. I'm going to remove this. I'm going to come back here. This is for horizontal repeat. Copy this, paste it. This is for vertical repeat, and this will change from x to y. As simple as that. Okay. Now, what happens in the case I have a very small page, I have a very small JPG, but I don't want it to be repeated, right? So if I by default has a very small JPG file, by default it will be repeating. But if I don't want it to be repeated, in that case, what I can do? No repeat background image. And the best example here is this one. Let me show you. I copy this one. I paste this one. I remove this background repeat. Okay. If I remove this background repeat and I just refresh this, can you guys see still it is repeated twice? Yes or no? In my background image, I have not repeated anything. By default, it is repeating twice. Yes or no? Okay. Can anybody tell me the reason why? Why it is being repeated if I'm not giving in the properties to repeat? Why it is still being repeated? Come on, guys, think logically, then let me know. 10 seconds to everyone. Just let me know, think logically. The question is, I'm including a background image. I'm not repeating it either along the x-axis or along the y-axis. Still, my image is being repeated. How? First of all, why I'm getting it repeated, and second is how I can resolve it. Let me know. Image size is smaller because of image size against space size ratio, because I've given no height and width restriction. By default, it will repeat. Tries to use the whole background, is repeating to cover entire page. Image is not enough to cover the whole page. All of you guys are correct. In more technical terms, the image resolution, not resolution, the image size is very small. So when I use the complete body as a container, in that body container, it is not being just used for one image. So it has to replicate. Anyways, now the second part comes, I don't want it to repeat. If I don't want it to repeat, what can I do? I can use something like this. Just use a semicolon here. Just define background. Repeat as no repeat. Okay. Refresh this. Refresh this. Now it is not repeated. If you don't want to repeat, just use background repeat as not repeat. That's it. Moving this, coming back here. We are here. You don't want to repeat, just use no repeat. Okay. Fifth one. If I want a particular image to be shown in a particular position, what can I do? I want the position of background image at a particular position. That also I can determine. How? Let's see. Let's say an example of this one. I want this position to be shown at a particular place. So I can say background position. In the position, I can show right top or wherever I want to show. Like come here, I refresh. Why it is not showing at the right top? Well, technically it is showing at the right top, but since the image resolution is high, so you won't be able to cover at the right top. If I want something like left top, based upon image resolution, it's trying to cover, but it is not able to do. Let's check with left bottom. Nope. Right bottom. No. The image resolution is not up to the mark, so that's why you're not able to see it. But this is the code for the same. There you go. Okay. Coming back here, this was the code for position of background image. Now what we have next? Background image is also done. Background repeat is also done. Now we have the attachment. So let's go with attachment. That is going to be the fourth one. The repeat one we have already covered. So that's fine. That is already covered. Next we have is background attachment. What do you have in background attachment? Background attachment can be, well, technically background attachment can be images. They can be something other static contents also. Inside that, there are two parts. What are the two parts? One is, let's call it as D. One is fixed and another one is scroll. What do you mean by fixed and scroll? Let's try to understand that first. Have you noticed in some web pages, as you scroll, image also scroll. And in other web pages, as you scroll, image does not scroll. Have you noticed that? Let me just give you one example. Okay. Observe something in this web page. I believe my web page is visible to all of you. Okay. Now just observe something. What I'm going to do is, this is an image. This is an image. I mean, this is not an image, but yeah, this is an image and so on and so forth. As I scroll, this image goes up. Similarly, this image goes up, this image goes up. But can you see something? This navigation bar, even if I'm scrolling up, this navigation bar is constant. Observe this again. This portion, the gray screen that you are seeing, this is my navigation bar, right? Observe, as I'm scrolling down in the page, my images are being scrolled, but my navigation bar is not being scrolled. So not scrolled, this is scrolled, this is scrolled, this is scrolled, every image is scrolled. But my navigation bar itself is not scrolled. Can you guys see that? This is something I wanted to show. So how is it possible that one kind of element can be scrolled, other kind of element cannot be scrolled? Or basically, not, okay, not necessarily Z index, but yes, one of the property can be used for that. So let's clear this. Let's see how we can do it. Let's start with an image, but you can apply to any other property also, not necessarily to an image. So I go here. This is what I want to do. If I want to keep it fixed, idea is my background image should not scroll. That's what fix means, right? It should not scroll and it will be fixed. Let's try to reduce the height and depth first. Okay. This is definitely not. Okay. Width I cannot define like this, so I'm not going to do this. Anyways, I can remove this. Now I have the image. Image is large enough so I cannot see whether it is scrolling or not. But anyways, if it should be fixed, then what I have to do is I just have to use one property, and that is if this I want the background position, I can just use background attachment and just use it as fixed. So this image will now be fixed. Okay. Copy this. Just add one light here. Now if you come here, now this is fixed. No matter how many big the web page is, it will always be fixed. The reason is the page is so small, so you won't be able to see the difference. But to be very honest, you will see that it is fixed. Let's try to implement this in index.html because that web page is relatively big. Here's your index.html. Let's try to include that property in CSS. And yep, let's open index.html. Okay. As you can see, this is now being fixed. If I zoom it here, you can see which is on the bottom left. Okay. This is what I was telling. And if I don't want it to fix, if I want it to be scroll every time I want to scroll, so what you can do is background image should scroll, will not be fixed. If it should scroll, I can just use it as scroll. Yeah. So go to index.html again, just name it as scroll, refresh it, make it refresh. Now you can see anytime you scroll, it will scroll up with it. It is not fixed now. So if I come here, I cannot see the G here. But if I come, I can see the G here. That's it. I will use the same command for navigation bar. In navigation bar, I can use the same thing because navigation bar, I can create it as a list. My navigation bar is just a list. In that list also, I can use this. So just like I'm giving for the body element, I can give it for the nav bar element. That's it. Okay. Your navigation bar is just a list, nothing else. Ordered list, unordered list, whatever way you make. Now, this is something that we have done. Background image and scroll also we have done. Now, what is the next thing? Next thing is a new topic. That new topic is going to be, so let me update here. CSS colors is done. CSS backgrounds is done. What next? Next, we want CSS fonts. Fonts also are very important. So I'm just removing it from to do. Let's see. Again, have a quick revision in terms of a CSS background. What have we covered? In terms of CSS background, we cover color, image, repeat, attachment, position, right? What is color? Inside color, we have two ways. Apply to whole body or web page the same color. You can just give this property in CSS. If I have to give different color to different sections in the web page, I can use two ways. One is using inline CSS and second using different ID, either by class or by div, right? Obviously, I can use RGB hexadecimal code, or I can just give normal words for colors as well, right? Everything is fine. When I'm using hexadecimal code, make sure I'm using hash. Then transparency and opacity in a web page. If I define the transparency or opacity, goes from this range to this range. Lower the opacity, higher the transparency, right? Or lower the transparency, higher the opacity, whatever way you call it. Then we talked about what is background image. Background image means add background color or add background image to complete web page. What does that mean? Either I can add a background image to a complete body or web page, or I can do it for a specific HTML element. So this is the code if I add in a body or if I specifically add in a particular element. In terms of repeating background image, it can be horizontally repeat or vertically repeat. Repeat X or repeat Y. Then if I don't want it to repeat, no repeat, position of background, I can just define background position. Then we start with attachment. In terms of attachment, we see it can be fixed, it can be scrolled. We have seen the code for all. Okay, all good. Now let's see for what do we have in CSS fonts. And after covering CSS font, then we'll go for, I think we have not done the borders. We'll cover for borders as well. Okay. Or in fact, let's do one thing. Before going to the CSS fonts, let's cover the CSS borders because that is also very important. Let's cover borders first. Later, we'll cover the fonts. And I will show you the material UI, which is the library which is given by Google. Majority of the time, or majority of the websites, you will be using on material UI. Again, you can use Bootstrap also, but you can use material UI also. Your choice. Anyways, let's first go with CSS border. Later, we'll go for CSS fonts and icons, whatever. Okay. What do you mean by CSS border? Right? We have already seen an example of a border. Let's see where we is. In terms of border, you have already seen this border 2 pixels. So you have seen already the size of the border. What I'm showing about is, let me close this one. Go back to here. I don't want this web page. I don't want this background image. So I'm just going to delete it. It's not just looking good. So remove this. Refresh it. Now it looks better. If you look this is the border I'm talking about. This red color border, as you can see on the screen, right? Now what I want to do this solid violet, yeah, whatever, solid violet on this. Now what I want to do here is, in this border, I want to create different types of border. So first of all, CSS border property, it allows to specify the style I want, the width I want, and color of an element border. All three. CSS border property allow you to specify the style, width, and color of element border. Now, what can be the different border style that I can use for? What do you have in different border style? You have dotted. Dotted is used for what? Dotted border, obviously. You have dash border. Solid, a solid border. Then double means double border. And so on and so forth. Many are there. Okay. Instead of going for each one of them, I'm just going to directly write the code. In the code, we can see whatever different borders we have. Okay. Now, in terms of code base, let's write the code here. Inside my style, I have to define first the properties or the class name. So let's start with class name. I want it to be center. Let's see what other centers we can make. So first, I want to make a class as dotted. In that dotted, I'm just going to show a dotted border. And what else? Just close your p tag. And property again, you have to give in the CSS. What will you give? You will say p dot dotted, because the ID I've given is dotted, the class ID I'm talking about. And what do I have to give? I just have to give border style as dotted. So if you just type border style, let me type it again. You can see style, bottom, inline, left, right, etc., etc. So in border style, solid, inherit, initial, revert, hidden, dotted, dash, double group, all of them they have listed here. Okay. Let's start with dotted first and put a semicolon, of course. Refresh this, see something. What do I get? I see a dotted border. All of you can see a dotted border being there. Of course, you can define the size, you can define the width the way you like, right? So border style is dotted. Same thing if I have to replicate, I can go for multiple times. So this one was for dotted. If I want to keep it for dashed, solid, let's quickly replicate. I can make it a dashed. I can make it a solid. I can make it double. What else? Let's make one more. We can use ridge also, groove also, whatever. Something like this. Okay. Now, same thing in the CSS as well. Paste it. P dot dashed. You can use it for dashed. Then we have solid, double, and ridge. Like this. Come back here. See what are different borders you can see. So this is a dotted border. This is a dash border. This is a solid border. This is a double border. Observe carefully if you're not able to see, this is actually a double border. It's not a single border. This is actually a double border. Okay, now I think it should be much more visible. You can see dots, you can see dash, you can see solid, you can see double border, you can see ridge border. Okay, cool. These are the different border and border types that we have. So I'm just going to take this code. This is the CSS code. And what should be the HTML code? The HTML code should be corresponding class elements. And that's it. That's all you need in terms of your CSS borders. Everybody clear with this? Let me know. Any doubt, please ask. Okay. Borders is clear to all. Just one more thing I want to clear is one more property is that you will see rounded borders. What do you mean by, and this rounded border property is used for rounded buttons also, right? What do you mean by rounded border? Let's cover that also. So one more thing in borders is just, what do you mean by rounded borders? And same thing is used for creating your rounded buttons as well. Same property used for rounded buttons. What does that mean first? Let's see one by one. I want to create a border and I just want to get a normal border, which is solid, right? So I have border I have created. Somewhere I have created border. Let's see. Yeah, border is 2 pixels, solid and violet. Let's start with this. Border is 2 pixels, solid and violet. Or even H1 style, I can say background color is red. Where have I used the wrong one? Okay. Background color is red, but I have not used a proper border, so that is fine. Let's remove the opacity. Let's remove the opacity as 0.0. Okay, opacity becomes 0.0, transparency becomes 1. Let's keep it 0.9. Much easier. Okay, this border I'm talking about. In this border, what I want to do is I just want to add one more property, is that I want to update its border radius. So what happens if I update its border radius? Border radius. And after every CSS property, you have to give a semicolon. Let's go back here. Semicolon. Border radius. In terms of border radius, what I want to do, let's say I want to give 5 pixel of border radius. Now observe something carefully. Have you seen something? Something has changed. Slightly, if you see, the border has become rounded. Now you should be able to see. Can you see that? Very slightly, but the border has become rounded. Okay. The more value, 50 pixel. Now if I refresh this, can you see it has become 50 pixel rounded? Everybody can see that. Cool. If everybody can see that, well and good. Let me minimize this. That's how you can give rounded borders. And the same property is used when you create rounded buttons also. You will see a lot of times rounded buttons. The property which is used is rounded borders. Okay. So just give this property, paste it here. Okay. Now your borders is completed. Now we can start with our CSS fonts. What do you mean by CSS fonts? Before going to CSS icons, let's talk about CSS fonts. What do you mean by CSS fonts? Font mean the font type that you're seeing on your screen, right? So by default, it is serif. It can be converted into sans serif, cursive, etc., etc. Okay. Let's go one by one. In CSS, the font family is the property which is used to specify the font of text. In CSS, font family is a property which is used to specify the font of text. Now, font family, it can be from font family from Google Fonts. It's your choice. You want to give the default font family property in CSS, or you want to get the font family from Google Fonts, or you want to keep text decoration, for example, underline, line through, etc. Or you want to keep a font style. Font style means what? Italic, oblique, etc., etc. You can keep a font weight. If I have to keep it bold, you can keep font variant also. What does that mean? You can keep font variant like to uppercase or something like this. You can define all those properties. Okay, let's see one by one. So in my index2.html, I have different classes, I have different properties for that. Let's try to change something here. So p.dotted, I have made the border style as dotted. What I want to do here is also. So just keep it here. Keep it here. Border style I've defined. Now what I want to define the font family. Font family I keep Times New Roman. Like this. I keep the font style italic and text decoration. I keep it as underline. Okay, for the dotted one. Come back here, refresh, see what you will see. I'll just zoom this and just observe what has changed. This font, first of all the properties, let's see one by one. Okay, what are the properties I defined? First thing, the border style is dotted, that is fine. Font style is Times New Roman. This font style is different from the font style in other pages, that is Times New Roman. Third is, font family is different. Font family is Times New Roman. Third is font style, that is italic. As you can see, it is italic. Text decoration, I have underlined also. All three properties you can see on your left-hand side. Repeating it again. First thing is font family is Times New Roman, which is different from other font family types. Second is font style is italic here. As you can see, it is italic in nature. Third, the text decoration, it is underlined also. So these are the properties that we have used. Let's make something else also. So I'm going to keep this. Well, pretty much I can give a space here. Space here. I want to change these three properties. So let's see one by one. Now I say font family. I want the Arial. And font style, I want to make it oblique. What next? I can make it line through. Okay. Refresh it again. Line through means you're cutting a line through it. So that's why it's called line through. It is Arial in nature, and you can see it is oblique, right? All of these properties is what we have seen. And that is how you can add more properties in the CSS as well. So I'm going to take this. Copy this. And just add to your code example. More and more properties, of course, you can keep on adding, so on and so forth. All clear with CSS fonts? Just let me know. Any doubt, please ask. All clear with CSS fonts? Easy? Okay. Until now, it's easy, right? Now let's go to next part, which is CSS fonts. Sorry, CSS icons. Fonts we just completed. What do we have in CSS icons? Why CSS icons is important? Let's see that one by one. Your icons, first of all, they are usually added in footers. Usually added in footers. What do you mean by icon? Let's try to understand that also. Here is my website. There you go. Where are the icons here? These are the icons I'm talking about. Can you guys see? Let me highlight a bit. This is what I'm talking about. Okay, I have to use another highlighter because it is also blue color. This is what I'm talking about. Okay, these are the icons. LinkedIn icon, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, so on and so forth. Everybody can see these icons. Okay, these are the icons I'm talking about. So usually you will find it on a footer of a web page. You will not find it in the header. Usually these are defined in a footer of a web page, right? These are the icons I'm talking about. How do we make these icons? Let's see how I can make. What is the use case of this icon? These use cases, majority of my websites or majority of any website, this website denotes that this icon is useful to understand what is the icon doing for. For example, rather than font awesome, we have other users as using Stadium, we can use them directly. Font awesome we have or many others as well using Stadium, we can use them directly. Yeah, that's correct. Now, what is the use case of icons is that the use case of icons is ultimately they are a link, right? So using a link also I can keep it. So I can just simply give an anchor tag, and based upon anchor tag, I can give href, right? But the difference is if you use an anchor tag, it will show you something like this LinkedIn and underline, something like this, right? People do not respond very, so this is related with the user experience. People do not feel very responsive whenever you have an underline link. For example, you give me underline LinkedIn, people are less likely to click on it. But if you give a LinkedIn icon, people are more likely to click on it. So when you use font icons, CSS icons, either use a font or some material UI, wherever you use from, or even if you use from Bootstrap, the idea is the icons are normal hyperlink, right? So instead of using directly hyperlink, we can usually use for icons. That is make it more responsive. Responsive in the sense, not responsive as a website, responsive for user people. So CSS icons first is usually added in the icons. Whenever you see this icon tag, that is used to denote your icons. What next? What are the ways you can use it? I'm going to tell you all the ways. One is you can use font awesome icons. So you can include font awesome icons, and then you can use icons. That is number one. Number two, you can use it from Bootstrap. What is a bootstrap? As the name say bootstrap, so you can find the CSS properties, HTML properties, and certain JavaScript properties as well combined into one. So you just have to bootstrap means something combined, right? So when you combine that in your HTML website, you can use pretty much navigation bar, whatever the CSS property and whatever the JavaScript properties are there as part of one bootstrap theme. So bootstrap icons also you can use. So I can include bootstrap icons and use icons. Third is what? Google icons. What do you mean by Google icons? Include Google icons and use icons. Something like this. That's it. Let's go one by one and let's see all the examples. Let me quickly show you the icons from Google. We can see from the code. And then we can check. There goes your icon. I want to create icon class. Name the icon class as material icons. Let's say I want to use an icon for cloud. Like this. And this should be closed as well. Class equal to material icons and this. Let's refresh. Why I don't see icons here first of all? H1 style equal to icons. Let me first delete this. Text align is center. I want to show the icons. Okay. That is strange. Why I'm not seeing any icons? Let me minimize. Okay, I'm able to see the icons. Fine. Now I put it back. Class equal to material icons, cloud, and this. Okay, material icons class I have to import. To import the material icons, well, technically I'm importing this material icon class. So how do you import the material icon class? To understand that, we have to first import the material icons. Let's see where we are. If I have to import this material icons, first thing I will need to do is, let's see what we can. Think it has to be included in script. Somewhere in the font or some we can bootstrap our icons, or we can just use the Google material icons. In order to use that, I think I'm not exactly sure, but let me search. Something related with link relation equal to style sheet and font Google APIs. Let me check. Google material icons and just type style sheet. That link you have to include. Just go there, click on it. Okay. Yeah, this is the link that you have to copy, right? Via Google Fonts, just copy this link href, paste it here inside your head. Before even going to your style, just include this. Link relation equal to fonts API, material icons relation equal to style sheet. Yep, this is good. And after this property of cloud should work. So if I come here and I refresh, yeah, can you see the cloud symbol has changed into a cloud icon? The cloud word has changed into a cloud icon. Can you see that? This one, that is what I was referring to. How does that happen? I have set up my Google Fonts by using this, by including this CSS file, right? So it is a CSS file, as you can see, and I'll just got it. You can find the icons. If you search for the cloud, you will find all the cloud icons here. Okay. Here you can search whatever icons you want. So for example, I say cloud. This one is with the cloud, and that's exactly what you're seeing here. If I change with the cloud upload, the cloud upload will be this, cloud download will be this, publish will be this, sync will be this, etc., etc. So whatever icon you want, you have the name for it. Based upon the name, you can mount it. Okay. Let's add few more icons. Let's come back here. Here we are. So now we got the material icons. Now we can include whenever icons that we want. Copy this, paste, paste, paste. I got the cloud. I want the favorite. I want what? Attachment. What next? I can think of anything random, computer, or I can think of traffic. Whatever corresponding Google font icons have, I will be able to see it. So I come here, I just refresh it and come and see. The first icon was cloud. I can see a cloud on the left, then I can see a favorite, then I can see attachment, a computer, and a traffic light, so on and so forth. So whatever the properties which are available, I will be able to use them directly as it is. Okay, that is via Google font icon. Everybody clear with this? Just let me know. Any doubt, please feel free to ask. Can we see colorful icons where for YouTube, LinkedIn? Yeah, that is not just given in font awesome that you have to use Bootstrap for that. Those colorful icons, for example, the one that I've used at the website, this is not just in given in Google. This is not just in given Google icons. Google icons provide you the basic ones. Pretty much you can use it like, let me check. I just checked with LinkedIn. I don't find anything. Let's try for YouTube. Yeah, it is not colored at all. So even if you want to check the colored ones, what you can do is you can check it from Bootstrap or anywhere else, but not in the Google icons. Font Awesome as a library, Font Awesome is very useful. So Font Awesome contains pretty much all the icons. I can show you that also. Font Awesome icons style sheet. Okay. They have a new version release, which is good. I can close this. Okay. Anyways, I want to close this. Yeah, that's where you can see what you want to include is just include this CSS path and you can include the icon. What icons do you have? I mean, this is the email address. This is not the icons. Let these click on this. Let's see what are the icons they have. Font Awesome icons are very useful and they are very helpful also. So you can see camera, border links, create image, and all of this that you can see. Okay. As you can see, this is color one. So font icons are very helpful. Any color one that you want to use, just use Font Awesome. Anyways, just closing this tab, and coming back to our website. What do we have next? Next we have is, I made a website, so I want to show you. If you're okay with it, can you please give an opinion how improve, what are changes for the end of class? We can discuss at the end of the class. You can share with a link or you can ping me directly over WhatsApp. I will be awake even after like 30 minutes after the class. So you can ping me there. I can check it later. Okay. Anyways, so this is something that we have covered. Now let's move to next topic. Next topic is CSS box model. Let me start that here. Very important topic. Then few topics are pending in CSS. For example, one is the flex, CSS flex and the properties, and that's it. Your border is done, your font is done. Now we are at box model. Then we'll cover the flex and grid view. And then we can start with JavaScript. So pretty much our CSS is going to be completed today. Anyways, coming to CSS box model, let's see. What do you mean by box model? And better understand that box model, I'll show you the image also. You can see it in your browser also. Position property, static and all, I can cover if you want, but it's not that much important, but I can show you. Anyways, when we say CSS, we say something called box model. So what is box model? The term box model, this is used about design and layout. When you talk about box model, you are generally talking about the design and layout. Okay, that thing. Let's see the picture of box model first. You can just type CSS box model, or you can check it in your browser as well. Okay, pick any of this image. All of them are good. Let's say this one. So as you can see, this box model, how it is described here is every CSS property is defined with certain things. Initially, internally, this is the content. On the top of content, you have the padding. On the top of padding, you have a border, and outside you have the margin, right? Repeating it again. This box model is nothing. This box model is just a box that wraps around every HTML element. So any HTML element you have, how CSS perceive it, it consists of margin, border, padding, and actual content. Okay. Inside is content, on the top is padding, on the top is border, extreme layer is margin. That is what we are going to understand one by one. How does that mean, or what does that mean? So putting it here, moving it here. Let's see. CSS box model is essentially a box wraps around every HTML element. CSS box model is essentially a box that wraps around every HTML element. What does it mean? It consists of margins, borders, padding, and the actual content. Okay. Image I have already shown you. Let's understand what does all this content means. Number one, what do you mean by content? Content means the content of the box where text and images appear. Number two, what do you mean by padding? Padding means clears an area around the content. Okay. And of course, the padding is transparent. Third, what do you mean by border? Border means a border that goes around padding and content. Okay. And finally, what do you mean by margin? It clears an area outside the border. And of course, the margin is also transparent. So content and border, these are not transparent, but padding and margin, these are transparent. Okay. You want to show it with an example, you can definitely show easily with an example. You can give different color to all of them, and you can see entirely different output. Okay. So any particular value you want to give, you can give different output to it. In terms of an example, let's see an example, what we can do. I can just use a div, close a div. Inside my div, I can give whatever value I want to give. Okay. So, hey, this is to demo the CSS box model. I just give this div in my CSS. What I can do, I can define my div inside CSS. I can give a background color. Let's say light gray. I can give the width, let's say 500 pixel. I can give a border. What I can give in the border, whatever size I want to give, let's say 20 pixel and solid green. Then I can give a padding. I can give a margin, let's say 20 pixel. I can give all these properties. Okay. I'll just minimize this. What happened to this? I think minimize this. Go to index2.html, refresh it. Now observe carefully. What do we have on the properties? What I've defined? I've defined the background color is light gray, that you can see this is light gray. Width is 500 pixel, fine. Border is 20 pixel, solid green. Padding is 50 pixel, margin is 20 pixel. Now, what did I tell you? Margin and padding does not contain any border. So you can see for a content, you can check the property. For the border, you can check the property. But for padding and margin, these are transparent. So that's why you're not able to see them. Okay. Cool then. If this is done, we can move to next part. There you are. Okay. That was your CSS box model basically. And in order to show that, let me give heading also. Refresh. Borders, icons, CSS box model. Now it looks really good. Okay. Anything else that we have used apart from borders and icons? No, right? Font we have used. So in terms of fonts, let's use fonts and icons. Refreshing it. I've used borders and fonts. I've used icons. I've used CSS box model. Now this looks much better. Okay. That was all about your CSS box model, how every HTML element is wrapped inside the CSS box model. Okay. Make sure to check the image that I just showed you. So this image looks good to me. Let me check the copy image address if I can. And if I can include the link here. Okay, this image will be really helpful. Anyways, can you explain why margin again? Sure. If you see here, margin is the outermost layer of any HTML element, right? Content is something which you have internally. Between content and border, there is padding. And between border and the external element, there is margin. Margin and padding, these are transparent. Okay, border and content, you can give color. So this example that I've given, let's get an annotation. I'll use blue one now. Okay. This one is the content. This one is the border. But if you observe carefully, between this border and between this part, there is some space. This is your margin, okay, which is separating one HTML element from another HTML element. Otherwise, every HTML element will be just next to each other, which will make very haphazard. So since there's a difference between HTML elements, that is what is separated by margin, right? Difference between content and border, that is given by padding. Padding and margin, these are actually used transparent. Content can have its own color, border can have its own color, but margin and padding are actually transparent so that you can have a crystal clear view of any HTML element. Otherwise, they will become adjacent to each other or very close to each other. Does that answer your question? Okay. So clearing this, coming back here. Where are we? Here are we. Let's see the next part. Next part is CSS positions. Okay. That is also very important. What do you mean by CSS position property? What are these useful for? Let's see. The position property, it specifies the positioning type of an element. Okay. Position property specifies the positioning type of an element, right? What do you mean by that? There are 5 different position values. Okay. These are static. Let's go one by one. Static, absolute, fixed, relative, sticky. Let's go one by one. Static, absolute, fixed, relative, sticky. What do you mean by that? First one, when we say static, it means static means it is not positioned in any special way. Not positioned in any special way means either you rotate by left, top, right, bottom, it will not be affected. So not affected by top, left, bottom, right. Whatever position you give, it will remain static. That is the meaning of static. Okay. Let me see if I can give you an example of that. Okay. If I want to keep a div static, that should not be changed by any position, right? By default, these are, so let me put it here, not positioned in a special way, not affected by top, bottom, and other things. Okay. It's always positioned according to normal flow of the page. Okay. And what next? Yeah, it is by default all HTML elements are static. Okay. The position of all HTML elements by default are static. Let's see an example. Index2.html, I just create div, right? So in my div, this property, I'm just going to use, if I have this div, now inside this div, I just want to use one property, that is position and static. Position as static. That's right. Come back here, refresh this, nothing will change. Why nothing will change? By default, the properties are like this. So that's why nothing will change. By default, all HTML elements are static. Come back here. First one was static. Next one is what? Next one is relative. What do you mean by relative? Relative means it is positioned relative to its normal position. Positioned relative to its normal position. Okay. If you set top, left, bottom, right, then accordingly it will adjust the property. Setting top, left, bottom, right will make adjusted changes. Okay. Let's see an example. So static code I have given. I'm just going to give example for same also. Remove all this. This is the code example. If you just keep the position property as relative, you will see the difference. And in the relative, of course, you have to give something, right? So in that relative position, what do I want to give? I want to give left as, let's say, 50 pixel. Now observe what will happen. I refresh this. Can you see something? What has happened? This size that you are seeing here, this 50 pixel it has moved by left to the 50 pixel. Why? Because I said in the CSS property, where is it? Let's make this here. Why? Because I said in the CSS property that, hey, you moved by left of 50 pixel. So this complete web page, it moved by left of 50 pixel. I refresh this. If I make it to right of 50 pixel, now you refresh this. Now it has moved 50 pixel to the right. Okay. So if you give it to the left, it will move to the left. If you give it to the right, it will make space to the right, or wherever, top, bottom, whatever you want to use. Just to give you an idea. So copy this, paste it. That's how it will impact the position of static. Clear the console. One moment. You have this. Okay. Here you go. In terms of relative, wherever position you want to give, that position will be impacted. Now what next you have? After having position, relative and static, then we can talk about fixed also. What do you mean by fixed? An element with the position fixed is positioned relative to the viewport. Okay. Which means it always stays in the same place. Even fixed means it is related to the viewport. What do you mean by viewport? In a DOM model, we have something called viewport, means everything that you're viewing inside a web page, that is part of viewport. So if it is always related to the viewport, means it always stays in the same place, even when a page is scrolled. Okay, because it is not specific, or it is not relative to any position, it is related to the viewport itself, right? So it will always remain in the same place even when a page is scrolled. Okay, now what next? Fixed element does not leave a gap in a page. Usually, if you'll see, whenever you create an element, even in the left, even in the right, if you don't give any property, there is slight gap in left, slight gap in right, so on and so forth. When you use a fixed element, there will be not gap. Okay. Now I can show you that CSS property also. Make position as fixed. Let's give certain properties here. Just gonna give this code. Gonna give this code. Position will become fixed. Let's make bottom as 0, right as 0. Border is already defined, so I'm not changing the border or anything. Okay. Left, you don't need to give. You can ignore this. Bottom and right 0, you can give. Give the width if you want to give as well. That is something we can check. 50 pixel as the width. Width is already given, so nothing to change. I'm just changing this. Bottom 0, right 0. Bottom 0, right 0. What does it mean? Bottom 0, right 0. What does it mean? Bottom 0 means it is zero distance away from bottom, means it is at the bottom. No, check again. Bottom 0 means it is 0 distance away from bottom, so it is at 0. It is at bottom. The right 0 means it is at the right also. So it is at the bottom right. It is at the bottom right. It is not at the top left. Understand it clearly. When you say, let's say it was left 50 pixel. Left 50 pixel means 50 pixel away from the left. When you say bottom 0 means 0 pixel away from the bottom. So let me explain again. This is your web page. When you say left 20 means 20 pixel away from the left, this is somewhere it will be. When you say top 0 means there is no gap between the content and your this. So element will remain at the top. Similarly, when you say top 0 and left 0, so element will remain here. When you say top 0 and element whatever distance, it will remain here. When you say bottom 0, element will remain here. When you say bottom 0, left 0, element will remain here. Bottom 0, right 0, element will remain on the right corner. Everybody clear with this? Everybody clear with this? Okay. If this is clear, now I can come back and we can check now. Okay, so bottom 0, right 0, ideally it should be at the right corner. Here is our web page. Observe carefully. I'm going to refresh. I did refresh. Where did it go? It go to the exact right corner. Can you observe something? That even if I am scrolling the page, the position is fixed. Even when I'm scrolling the page, the position is fixed. Can you guys see that? That is what fixed does. No matter how big the size becomes, this will remain always fixed here. Okay. Can we cover CSS media and animation? We can. That is not a very important topic, but if you want, I can. But this is an important topic. Whenever you want to keep it fixed, whenever you want to make it changed, so on and so forth. So moving to this is the code example that we have just seen. Width we have already have, so I'm not updating the width. Remove this. That was a fixed property, and finally we have absolute property. What do you mean by absolute property? Absolute property means it is positioned relative. Since it is absolute, it is positioned relative to the nearest position ancestor or parent, whatever you call it. Whatever the parent property will be following, relative to that, its position will be fixed. Okay. Now, moves with the page while scrolling. The difference between fixed is a fixed will not move even while you scroll, but absolute will move while scrolling. Okay. So take an example. Now I can keep this position as relative. The moment I keep this position as relative, let's keep the bottom and right same. I'm just going to refresh this. Now, if you observe it, it is moving while scrolling, right? I'm able to move it while scrolling. That's it. Remove this, copy and paste this. There you go. Okay, so one more thing that we have just completed today, that is CSS position. Very important topic as well. Box model is done, and then we have CSS position. That is also we just completed. Before I move to next, let me see what else do we have. Relative and all we have covered. Absolute also we have covered. Anything else that I need to do? Float is pending. Let me cover float also. Okay. And then I'll keep at least 10 minutes to revise everything because we covered a lot of topics. We covered a lot of code in CSS. So it's important to revise that as well, right? Anyways, one more thing I'm taking up, CSS float, and then we'll go for next revision. What do you mean by float? As the property says, you want to float something. So float means how an element should float. Okay. Clear element means what elements can float beside the cleared element. Now, float is used for obviously positioning and formatting the content. Now, what can be the value of float? The value of float can be something like left float, value left. Right float, I can move it to right. If I want to move it to left, I can just use float left. If I want to move it to right, I can say float right. If I just wanted to make it none, it means there is no float. And that is the default behavior. If I say inherit, What does that mean? Inherit means, you'll use this word inherit a lot of times. Inherit means just take the value from the parent one. Float value of its parent. What do you mean a parent now? So as I have already explained DOM model multiple times, here I'm writing in detail also. Document object model. What does that mean? DOM model or the document object model says every HTML element is like a document. Every HTML element is like a document. And it's a combination of certain parent-child infrastructure, parent-child structure. And parent-child structure, who is the parent? Who is the root? The root element is the parent. So let's have a look. Every HTML element is like a document, part number 1. Next, it goes with a property root, which is a parent. Obviously, it can have multiple child. So child 1, child 2, child 3. Okay. So let's create a div class equal to div1. Name it as first. Close the div. First, second, and third. Okay. Now, as per DOM, what will happen? As per DOM, div is the parent class. And this div1, div2, div3. These are going to be the child classes, or the children, you can call something like this. Okay. When you say I want the float property to be inherit, what does that mean? If div1 follows position as div, that's what it means. So whatever child is there follows the same position as parent. That's what it means. When you say inherit, not just necessarily in float, anywhere you see the property inherit means whatever the parent class is following, the child is supposed to follow the same thing in terms of colors, in terms of location, in terms of anything else. Okay. Now, what else we need? The best use for that can be seen where? The best use for that can be seen, let's say, float property is used to wrap text around images. Okay. Sometimes you want something, I want image on the left, and immediately on the image of the left, I want something on the right, right? So image and text, image on the left and text on the right. So you want the image to be floated, right? In that case, you can use this. What example can be? I can use an image. I can float the image to wherever I want. I can give the height, I can give the width, whatever I want for that image. Okay. 100 pixel, 200 pixel, for example. I can do something like this. Okay. Cool, guys. I think that much is sufficient for today class. Let me quickly revise because we have discussed a lot of things. So we need to have a revision quickly as well. Moving on. A lot of topics we have covered. In today's class, we have started from backgrounds, CSS background, border, font. Topics we have covered in today's class. Let's go one by one to have a crystal clear understanding again. Very first thing, CSS background, multiple things: background color, background image, background repeat, background attachment, background position, right? 5 things. Background color, 2 things. Number 1, if I have to apply to the whole body, I can apply to the body. If I have to apply to different sections, there are 2 ways against. I can use inline CSS or I can use different IDs. Obviously, I can use normal color as a word. I can use RGB. I can use hexadecimal value as well. Then we talked about transparency or opacity in a web page and define transparency of an element. Code we have seen for that. We have seen about background image. It adds background image to complete body or web page or add background image to specific HTML element. Then if I have to repeat a background image, I can repeat horizontally, I can repeat vertically. If I don't have to repeat any background image, I will say background repeat, no repeat. Then we talked about position of background image. So in position of background image, I can give background image, background repeat, and position as well. Then we talked about background attachment. I have to give attachment as fixed. It means it will not be fixed if I give a scroll. Fixed means if background image will not scroll, if you scroll the page, and scroll means background image will scroll when you scroll the page. Let me add this line. When you scroll the page, same thing here. Like this. Okay. Then we move to CSS borders. Borders means property allowed to specify the style, width, color of an HTML border. So in border, it can be dotted, dashed, solid, double ridge, etc., etc. Here's the examples that we have seen in the code as well. Rounded borders is the same property which is used for rounded buttons also, right? Property is border radius. So border radius property you can use. CSS fonts, we talked about different fonts type, font families, serif, sans serif, cursive. You can have font serif, you can have text decoration, font style, font weight variant, all of that you can see as you are using this example. Okay. Line through, underline, font family, font style, all of them you can use for as per your convenience. Then it comes about CSS icons. What do you mean by CSS icons? Icons which are usually added in footers just to make it. So this icon denote the icon tab. There are many ways. First, you can use font awesome icons, which is the most popular one. Second, you can bootstrap a particular theme, or third, you can use Google icons. In this example, I've used the Google icon code. Okay. Code is not listed. Let me give the code here as well. What did we use in the icon? Here we go in the icon. This is the HTML code. And what have we included? We have to include this. Okay. Similarly, you can use for font awesome icons or bootstrap icon, etc., etc. Then we went for CSS box model. This is the link where you can see the image for box model. It's used about design and layout. CSS box model is essentially a box that wraps around every HTML element. So every HTML element has this box model. It consists of margin, border, padding, and actual content. Lowermost actual content, then comes padding, then comes border, then comes margin. Again, padding and margin are transparent. Content and border, these are actually non-transparent. So if you want, by default, if you see any HTML element, it will keep some space between top and left, right? If you want to avoid that, just immediately delete the margin. That is the outermost layer. Just set margin 0. It will immediately start with the left one or the top one. Then we talked about CSS position. Position property specifies position of an element. 5 different properties: static, absolute, fixed, lattice, sticky. Static is a default property, so not position any special way. It's not affected by top, left, bottom, right. Position according to normal flow. By default, all elements are static. Relative means related to its normal position. So when you say position relative, left 50 pixel. From its current position, it will switch back to left 50 pixel on the left. From its current position, it can switch back to right, and so on and so forth. Fixed means position relative to the viewport. It means it will not scroll even if you scroll. Absolute means relative to the nearest viewport, so it will be able to scroll. If you give CSS float, float means how an element should float. What elements float behind the cleared element, and float obviously positioning and formatting content. Float is used for that, right? We talked about DOM model. What is the root, and after every root, what are the child parents, so on and so forth. The best use of float property is to use the wrap around the text images. So let's say you want to image a left on that, and on the right side you want to have a paragraph. You don't want that image come then paragraph comes on the bottom. You want image on the left, parallelly paragraph to the right. For such cases, float is the best property to use for. Okay, this is what we have covered so far. Now what we are pending is we are pending with navigation bar and drop down. Anything else? I think that's all. Navigation bar, drop down, flex box, and that's it. Yeah. Background image and CSS position are same because both are fixed and scroll. Yes, technically, yes. So we have to cover certain things. CSS flexbox. That is one thing. What else I can see in the syllabus? Okay. Navigation bar and CSS drop down. Okay. And then we'll start with our JavaScript. I'll just copy this, paste like this. That should be the ideal flow. Okay. One moment. Please cover line items. What exactly you need in the line items? Can you use polish in place of using float? Can you use CSS polish in place of using float? If you use relative, then you have to make both of them as part of one div. So in the one div, you can give divided 1 and divided 2. The best use case, that's why I mentioned, you can use it. The best use case I mentioned is in terms of float is, you want an image, immediately right to the image or immediately left to the image, you want a paragraph, right? If you don't give that way, your image will come on the top, then paragraph will come on the right bottom, right? This is what you don't want. This is the same feature which is used in Microsoft Word also. So when you will see in Microsoft Word, you insert an image, you see a particular paragraph written. So image will always come on the top of paragraph or bottom of paragraph, but not adjacent to it. So for that, you have to use wrap, right? That's exactly what Float does as well. Okay.